You think your kid's school is safe? Think again. Because the truth is this, parents are being sold a fantasy, a brochure, a version of safety, a hallway poster, if you will, a PowerPoint. Meanwhile, the real world doesn't care about policies, slogans, or political feelings. The real world runs on speed, violence, and intent. And when seconds matter, your child's life depends on preparation, not optimism. Most schools in America are less prepared today than they were 10 years ago. Even after every tragedy, every report, every wake-up call, and the data proves it. Let me show you exactly what I mean. In 2024, the U.S. Secret Service put out a report on school attacks. Do you know what they found? 3 out of 4 attackers showed warning signs, and nobody acted. Not because people didn't care, but because the system was built on hope, not readiness. And here's the part no one wants to admit. A school shooter doesn't snap. They rehearse, they study, they test doors, they observe staff routines. They know exactly when adults are distracted. Meanwhile, what does the average school do? Hold one lockdown drill a year and call it prepared. That's not safety. That is theater. Let me give you something even more alarming. In 2023, over 70% of American public schools reported not having a single full-time trained security professional on campus. Not one. But we somehow have endless funding for new mascots, staff retreats, and curriculum committees. Listen closely. If your kid's school has a full-time diversity council, but no trained armed defender, someone has their priorities backwards. And it's more than likely the school district. And let's get factual for a second, because emotion isn't enough to fix this. According to the FBI's 2024 active shooter report, the average school attack lasts 2 to 5 minutes. The average police response time is 7 to 12 minutes. Read that again. Do the math. Your child's survival window closes before help even arrives. That is why trained armed professionals on campus aren't optional. They are essential. Because here's the reality no politician will say out loud. The person who stops the threat is almost always the person already on scene. Not the phone call, not the plan, not the hope. The person physically there. And this is where schools fail you the most. Ask your district a simple question. When was the last time your staff conducted a real scenario-based training with a trained professional? Watch how fast the room gets very uncomfortable. Most districts don't do it. Most administrators have never even attended one themselves. They're making decisions about your child's life from a freaking conference table. Meanwhile, the threats aren't slowing down. Here's another fact. The number of school intrusion attempts, not shootings, just attempts to breach locked doors, rose 43% in 2023 through 24. Nobody reports that. Why? Because districts don't want backlash. They don't want to look unprepared. They don't want you asking the questions they can't answer. Stay with me. If your school can tell you the lunch menu for the next 30 days, but can't tell you who is actually responsible for protecting your child in an emergency, that's not a school. That is a liability. Now, let's go deeper. In 2024, GAO or GAO study found that more than 55% of school doors labeled secured were not secured when tested. That means half the protection parents think exists, it doesn't. I can promise you this, a violent attacker tests doors. They check weak entry points. They know exactly where adults cut corners. But schools, they test doors once a year, around lunchtime, when the news cameras are invited. This is the difference between reality and presentation. And if you think, well, my district is different, here's another wake-up call. The average U.S. school spends less than 1% of its budget on security. 1%. But they'll spend millions on rebranding, sports turf, new laptops, consultants, and political priorities. Here's the truth. Safety isn't expensive. Negligence is. And I'm not talking about turning schools into fortresses. I'm talking about trained, certified, vetted defenders on campus. People who understand violence, who understand response timing, and who understand that the first 30 seconds determines everything. Let me make something painfully clear. If your district refuses to hire trained armed professionals but still has school resource officers rotating between campuses, that is not protection. That is public relations. One officer covering 5 schools is like having a fire extinguisher down the street and calling it prepared. And before anyone says, well, armed staff is dangerous, here's another fact. Over 40 states allow armed school staff with specialized training. Not one has experienced an incident of a trained staff member mishandling a firearm or causing a student injury. 0. The media will never say that, but the data is public. Meanwhile, over 300 schools in America have stopped active attacks because trained defenders were already on site. You don't just hear about those because they don't fit the political narrative. Let me ask you this. Why do we trust armed trained professionals to protect banks, courthouses, senators, celebrities, jewelry stores, and stadiums, but not our children? We have things backwards, don't you think? Why is your child the only person in society expected to wait unprotected for help? Here's the real answer. Politics, soft leadership, liability, optics, and a culture where adults care more about appearing peaceful than actually providing protection. But you, as a parent, don't get to live in theories. You send your child into that building every morning. You deserve answers, real answers. So here's what you can say or do starting today. Ask your district, who is the trained person who responds in the first 20 seconds of a violent threat? If the answer is, we will call the police, that is a confession of failure. Then ask them, when was the last time your teachers ran real scenario-based training? Not a drill, real training. You're not going to like the answer, I can tell you that. Ask them after that, what percentage of your budget goes to actual security? Not programs, but protection. And here's the final thing I want you to think about. When they think protection, they're thinking security cameras. That's not the case. Hope is not a strategy. Silence is not a shield. And pretending it won't happen here is the mindset every school had, right up until it did. Your child deserves more than optimism. They deserve trained defenders. They deserve readiness. They deserve adults who take their safety more seriously than their politics. If you're a parent who's tired of the lies, tired of the excuses, tired of schools treating safety like a checkbox, comment protect down below. Share this video. Speak up at your next board meeting, because change only happens when parents stop being polite and start demanding accountability. Protect your kids. Prepare your schools. And don't ever apologize for expecting real safety. Watchman out.